Hello, I'm Dr. Troy Howell from James A. Haley Veterans Hospital, and you're watching Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hi, I'm Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. Yes, I usually wear a suit. Yes, I normally have a tie. Today I don't have a suit and tie. I have a DAV shirt on, Disabled American Veterans. I'm a lifetime member of that organization because some of the DAV guys got me and helped me understand how important it was to go to the VA for treatment. And I have with me today a gentleman I want you to meet, Dr. Troy Howell.
That's correct.
And you're a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm. Psychiatrist by training, currently a suicide prevention coordinator at James A. Haley Veterans.
Now, I do have a pass to get out of here, so you can't keep me.
Fair enough.
But you're here to talk about suicide prevention.
Yep.
And the seriousness of the problem. We have 20 of our vets dying every day to suicide. 20. That's a lot every year. And you're going to share with us some of the things that we need to do as family members and vets to cut that number down, right?
Before we even start, I would just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of spread the word of what suicide prevention at the VA is. It's a very important topic, both locally and nationally. The national numbers are increasing. It's not just veteran population. Local or recent data shows that the veteran population is sort of stabilized over the last few years, whereas the national rate is increasing every year. It's one of the stats I heard that to me is very eye-opening is there's a suicide every 40 seconds across the world. So
wow.
It's a huge number. It's not just us, it's not just Tampa, it's not just Florida, it's everywhere. The more the community knows about this, the more likely they will intervene with somebody who's in need.
You know, you thank me, but I have to tell you, you people at the VA, here at the Haley VA, have been absolutely phenomenal to me. I spent a week there not long ago, and I couldn't have been treated better in any hospital in the country.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that we're doing what we're supposed to do.
All right, we've got a VA system here. And we keep hearing all these things. You can't get an appointment. Oh, you just might as well go somewhere else. They're not going to treat you. You're going to be stacked up like cordwood. And that's not been my experience.
It's not my experience at the Tampa VA either. I mean,
there might be some hospitals somewhere in the nation that's happening.
Correct. I mean, the VA's been through its trials and tribulations recently, right? And there were wait lists and things of that sort. I never experienced that here in Tampa, and maybe I'm really biased being here through residency since 2001, but the reality is I've never seen it. If somebody needs to be seen, I can see them the same day if necessary. My staff can see them the same day. Mental health clinic has same day access now.
Are we staffed up pretty well now?
Yeah, we could always use more staff, right? But the reality is we're getting to the point where we're able to staff on the notion of being able to see people same day. So substance use disorders clinic sees people same day in a walk-in clinic. When people are ready to be seen, we'll see them. Mental health clinic has same day access if necessary. The ER is open 24 hours a day. If people are in crisis and need to be seen, we have staff to be able to see them 24 hours a day. So
I've used the ER. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that there's an ER, but then there's the other section that
urgent care,
care, which gets you into a whole different string. You're not sitting behind a bunch of people coughing.
So ER is, they triage them based upon level of need. Quickly, correct. And urgent care will see somebody who maybe doesn't need to go in the hospital, but does need urgent attention. We'll get that attention done quicker than if they waited to see their primary care, because they are obviously there in need of treatment of some sort. So
let's talk, because by the way, if you're watching this program, you're not a vet, you still need to be watching this program.
Absolutely.
And if you are a vet or you have relations who are a vet, you want to make sure that you share this information with them. Mm-hmm. because you just might save a life.
Correct. The community is our biggest partner. I mean, the VA, you mentioned the 20 suicides per day. So there's 20 veterans that die by suicide every day. Only 6 of those are actually getting treatment within the VA at the time of their death. And only 3 of those 6 are actually in mental health treatment. Those other 14 that aren't in VA services, that's where the community comes in. It's a huge part of what we need to do to find those folks who aren't in VA treatment and provide assistance where needed, so that when they get into their crisis time, they know there's resources available to them. They know there's people that care about them, and there's a reason for them to continue on, because we can provide that help, because we can get them into treatment, and they can get into recovery. The research will show you're more likely to get into recovery and recover from your symptoms when you're in treatment than when you're not in treatment. Unfortunately, a mental health stigma that comes along with mental health disorders. And with
that is so sad.
And
it really
with that,
is.
people are afraid for a variety of reasons, whether they're anxious about admitting that they're having these issues, or they're anxious about meeting people like myself for treating them. Once we get over that hump, people tend to do much better. But we have to get them into treatment. We have to show them that there's resources available, and there's ways for them to get into the VA and access the treatment that's available to them.
Actually, I had a friend up in Michigan who was put in the cold water installation up there, which was a mental institution.
Okay.
And when she came out and people would say something, she said, yes, I've got a paper that says I'm sane. How about you?
Gotcha.
And it was kind of funny the way she
Right.
did it, but it gave you something and said, look, I've been through treatment, everything is good.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, the reality is treatment's individual for everyone. So what happened in Michigan is probably not what's going to happen to most of the people that come to Tampa, but that individual treatment needs to happen for that individual. So that individual veteran needs therapy. We can provide that.
Sure.
That individual needs to process through a traumatic experience they've been through. We can provide that. But that hump that needs to happen is getting over that hump to say, come into treatment.
How does a vet know when it's serious enough that they ought to come in?
Well, there's a variety of mental health disorders, things like depression or anxiety or psychosis. All of those have sort of individual symptoms that are associated with that specific disorder. What I would say with that question is, if the individual feels like they're not doing something they used to do as well, meaning they're not going to work, they're not going to school, they're withdrawing from their friends and family, they're not doing the things they used to enjoy as much, that's probably the time to go and ask somebody for help. There's lots of symptoms. I could talk about depression symptoms, things like poor sleep, lack of interest in doing things you used to enjoy, excessive guilt, poor energy, problems with concentration, changes in appetite, thoughts of hurting yourself or hurting others. Those symptoms are all symptoms of depression, including depressed mood and sadness, which I kind of skipped over, but those are all symptoms of depression. But there's also anxiety, there's panic attacks, there's post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't think it serves veterans to try to go through every nitty-gritty symptom. Mm-hmm. It's more about how they feel and what their actions or their behaviors are sort of heading towards. So things like agitation, it's a big one that we look at from a suicide prevention perspective, because research shows that as people get to the point of really considering death by suicide, agitation becomes a huge part of their interaction with either friends and family, with their interactions at work, where anger becomes a possible reaction to everything. The other part to that is social withdrawal. So you have somebody who's a social butterfly and is doing multiple social activities, and then all of a sudden decides they don't want to go outside the house.
So we're looking
anymore.
for changes.
Changes are the biggest risk warning sign, right? So there's risk factors that are considered like symptomatology, so poor sleep, poor concentration, poor appetite, those types of things. And then there's clinical warning signs, things like agitation, social withdrawal, suicidal ideations or thoughts of suicide, planning for suicide, suicidal behaviors, which suicide behaviors can kind of go anywhere from looking on the computer about ways to die by suicide all the way to actual suicide attempts. So anything in that sort of range, we're going to want to know as providers. So
Interesting.
That we can provide
When you said that, I was thinking of driving too fast,
Yeah.
or trying to juggle knives or do something. But the more simplistic things like going on the computer
Right.
and looking at how to do this, that,
Yep.
or another thing, I just didn't think of right away.
That increases risk. So research will say that the ability to die by suicide is one of the things you have to overcome to actually die by suicide. There's a huge proponent of survival, which everybody has a knack for survival. And when you're young and somebody tells you to hold your breath underwater, you hold it until you can't anymore, and then you immediately go to the top, right? There's this knack of survival that we all have innate to us. And then this ability to die by suicide, it's not necessarily the desire to die by suicide, it's the ability, right? So the more
I'm too big a coward.
well, and on some level, that's a part of it, right? There's a fear factor, but
Yeah.
for people that are at higher risk, they've reduced that fear factor. So the number of suicide attempts increases somebody's chances for suicide because every time they have a suicide attempt, they're reducing their fear of death.
Oh, really?
So the theory behind it is the ability to die by suicide isn't necessarily, it's sort of a complex equation. It's not just want to die by suicide or risk factors or ability. It's kind of a combination of everything. And when they intersect in the middle, that's when people are at their highest risk. So looking at something online about a way to die by suicide theoretically educates that person to reduce their fear of it. Doesn't necessarily make perfect logical sense because you're thinking, I'm still fearful of it.
No.
But the reality
But exposure does.
Exposure is going to, that's why some professions are more likely to die by suicide than others, because the theory is that their fear of death is lower.
Really?
Is lower. So somebody like a police officer who may have a lot of traumatic experiences or traumatic visuals will be less fearful of that because they've experienced in multiple segments of their life.
And the guys coming back from the Gulf
Same sort of concept.
see a lot of this, and what really bothers me is that half the people in this country don't even realize there's a war going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we take these reservists and we send them over there for a year, bring them back, put them back in suits or whatever,
Right.
and say, now go back into your normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry this car is going to blow up next year. But wait a minute, next year we're going to send you back over,
Yep.
and you have to worry about that again.
It's the importance
I
of
just don't
post-traumatic stress treatment.
understand
Right,
how
so-
we can do that to these people constantly.
And one of the things that Secretary Shulkin is really, I mean, he's obviously one of his top clinical priorities is suicide prevention. But as a part of that, it's to improve that transition from active duty status to civilian or veteran status. So trying to minimize the number of bridges that have to be crossed or hoops that have to be jumped through to get active duty treatment followed up with veteran treatment. So that's a process that's being worked on as we speak to trying to make that process easier so that a guy like a reservist who may do some deployment and then come back and need treatment quickly isn't going to have to go through as lengthy of a process. That's the conceptualization of making this such a top priority. It's not just looking at how do we prevent suicide, it's how do we make sure that people are getting the care or treatment they need to minimize the risk of suicide.
In my generation, as I look back at D-Day and I watch the guys in the landing crafts having to charge out and get to the beach, I thought, how could anybody do that?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if I could. I suppose, I guess you had to be more afraid of the sergeant behind you than you did the machine gunner in front of you. But the fact is, these people, we're sending them over for a year and then bringing them back and saying, just go about your normal business. But every backfire, every trash can, they've been told is a killer.
right.
I don't know why we don't have more people in treatment.
And there's probably has to do with that stigma, right? So, and when you talk about military culture, in the military, people are told, don't say you have a problem, because you could lose rank, or you could, or it could change your status, or it could put you to early retirement. So they're taught to be stronger. They're taught to not necessarily say this is happening. And then when they transition, and this is not through experience, this is just through what I've been taught through talking to people in DOD, is their transition to say, tell the VA about everything. But there's still this huge stigma. There's still this whole paradigm of, I'm struggling, but if I admit that I'm struggling, potentially it changes the way I can interact. It changes my veteran status.
But I'm assuming that anything they tell the VA is not reported back to command.
No, I mean, in the reservist population, they're a veteran within our facility. So yeah, it's mental health treatment. So HIPAA applies just like it does if they went to a private sector.
It just amazes me. What if someone feels that their father or their mother or their brother or son or husband or wife needs this treatment, but they can't get them to go to do it?
So there's a couple resources that I'm going to speak about. One's called Coaching into Care. But even before I get to there, I'm just going to sort of tell everybody as a community, ask. So if you think somebody's in trouble, talk to them. If you have a loved one that you're concerned about, ask a question. No loved one's going to look at you and say, I don't want to talk to you. They may tell you that.
Right.
But eventually, if you show them that you care, if you provide them support, they're going to reach out to you. No human being wants to be shunned. But the person that's feeling these symptoms is likely feeling shame about having these symptoms. So the more we open up the opportunity for conversation, the less likely they are to travel down the path to potentially be at risk for suicide. That's the first suggestion. The second thing is if you've had that conversation and the person's
Can we drop back to that conversation?
Absolutely,
first?
sure.
You know, I'm a fix-it person. Mm-hmm. If you come to me with a problem, I'm going to try and fix it.
Yep.
And I'm not quite sure that that's the best avenue to take with somebody who does have a problem. Maybe us fix-it people ought to pay more attention to listening to it.
Right. So listening's the biggest part of that. So you want to hear what this person's talking about. Are they saying they feel like a burden to their loved ones? Are they saying they're hopeless about the future? Are they talking to you about how angry they feel or internally they're having such rage? Those are things you want to hear because those are the things that you should be reacting to. And to go back to the fix-it mentality, right? I would pretend that person had a broken arm. You wouldn't necessarily be able to fix the broken arm right then and there, but you could get them to the orthopedic surgeon that may need to do surgery to fix that broken arm.
Exactly.
That's the fix-it
So
mentality.
that's the fix-it part.
Right. It's get them
Don't try to argue with them that they shouldn't feel bad or that they're not worthless or whatever, but rather listen to them and then take action after that.
Hear what they're saying and take action to help them get into treatment, which is, in this scenario, going to be mental health treatment. Your support will likely lead that person to getting into treatment more so than you're sort of quiet about it, or I'll fix it for you, we'll go out and do this, that, or the other to make you feel better. That may be a great thing in the moment.
Here, let's have a drink.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to advise that, but long term, the best thing to do for that person, honestly, is to listen and encourage. Coaching into Care is the thing I was speaking of. It kind of gives you some pointers. It's on veteranscrisisline.net. It's an app you can get on your phone. It's called Coaching into Care again. But it gives family members, friends, loved ones, people in the community, it gives them an ability and gives them some tools to have in their toolbox when that happens to deal with that. Okay. And helps them coach them into care and to get care into the VA.
Are there any groups that would be helpful for people who do have people with PTSD and things like that?
Well, there's plenty of community resources within the VA. We have survivor groups, bereavement groups, hospice groups that are related in that area. Okay. Not necessarily for somebody who's trying to coach somebody into care, more for assisting with somebody as a survivor. There's TAPS is another community organization that assists with family members or friends after they've lost a loved one.
And the VA could direct people to those.
Yeah, suicide prevention team, which I'm the team lead of, definitely coaches people to those community resources frequently. Crisis Center of Tampa Bay is another one, which we're partnering with later on in September for World Suicide Prevention Day. But we're able to, even if somebody didn't want to come into the VA, vet centers are available. So there's multiple avenues for people to get care, but reaching out, whether it be to a loved one or through the Veterans Crisis Line, which again, probably we'll speak to more a little bit, but if that's the avenue, we can help them. And we respond to all those Veterans Crisis Line consults that we get from the national folks and make a phone call within 24 hours to make sure those people are given the support that they need.
One of the things, and I started the show by saying this, that bothers me is that so many people who are eligible for the VA don't go there.
Right.
Well, I don't need it. I've got this insurance or I've got that. But the VA, you people are suited to do this particular job with this group of clients.
Right.
So I would encourage everybody before they need you to go in there and do it. But what if they haven't done it?
First thing I would say, if we feel like we're in crisis, right? If they feel like it's to a point where they need help immediately, obviously a local ER, calling 911 if it's that emergent. But if it's not to that point, but you want somebody to talk to, you want somebody to reach out to, Veterans Crisis Line's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. 1-800-273-8255 is the number. It's a national hotline. It's not just for veterans.
For local, yeah.
But 1-800-273-8255, you'll be prompted if you're a veteran to press 1. Press 1, it'll immediately take you to one of our national call centers. There's one in Canandaigua, New York, and a new one in Atlanta, Georgia. They've reduced the number of wait times and holds based upon this new staff that they've hired in Atlanta. It's been a tremendous change in the way we're able to respond to these things. We've seen our number of consults go up just because the number of calls to backup centers are decreasing and decreasing almost to the point we don't see them that much anymore. So that's the first step, right? What will happen is the responder will respond to the moment, meaning if they need further assistance, if they feel like they need medical treatment right away, the responder will help achieve that. If at that moment they just need somebody to talk to and kind of work through something verbally, the responder will do that as well. At the end of the phone call, regardless of whether it was an emergent consult or emergent call or just a routine call, they are going to ask them if they want to consult a suicide prevention coordinator locally. That comes to us. Within 24 hours, we're going to respond to the person who called. We're going to provide further support. We're going to make sure if they need treatment, we're able to get it for them. If they need treatment that day, we're able to work to make sure that they get treatment that day.
Even if they don't have a VA card?
Even if they don't have a VA card, we will help them through eligibility. We'll refer them to eligibility. We'll make sure whatever's happening in that moment.
Because if I'm in that point, I'm not much for signing up and doing stuff.
No, and we will help them. We will never, our case managers will never call and say, bring your card to eligibility and you'll get it figured out. We're going to say, give me your name. I'm going to connect you to somebody in eligibility. We're going to make sure this works. Here's where you can come in and see somebody. And so they'll get an appointment literally before they get off the phone if they want it. Now, some people don't necessarily want an appointment. They just want to talk to somebody and we'll handle it in that direction, whatever that individual would like to have happen. That's what we're going to try to do.
Now, the VA does have certain areas that prevent people from getting care. For all practical purposes, if you make too much money, if you weren't in the right time period and anything. Yeah, but none of those should stop them from getting a hold of you, correct?
Correct. Eligibility is eligibility, meaning they're going to figure out the ways that the eligibility, if there's a copay needed, if they get medications. That's not my specialty, but my specialty is making sure that person gets care, whether they're eligible, quote unquote, or they need absolute care right now. We're going to make sure that they get the treatment they need.
Doctor, we have about 5 minutes left, and I don't want to leave this hanging because it's too very important to me. What else would you like to get across that is very, very important to you and you think that maybe we haven't talked about?
Well, there's a variety of things that I think the community has to be aware of. We talked about risk factors and some warning signs. The biggest thing from my perspective is we need community partnerships. We need people that are willing to address people, talk to people, make sure that if they see somebody in a potential crisis that they're intervening before the crisis happens. So that's the biggest thing for me. Know the resources that are available. If a friend or a family member is concerned about somebody and they don't know what to do, call the crisis line. Call 1-800-273-8255 and press 1. They'll take your information, it'll come to us, and we'll try to reach out to that veteran. It's not always that the veteran's going to be receptive to our phone call, but we're still going to support them and try and let them know we're here.
Okay, that's important.
If they want it. And again, part of this is reducing those stigma bumps that we talked about. If we can get people to understand that mental health is just as important as medical health, the stigma no longer is there. Some people are afraid to admit they have diabetes because that brings its own connotation. But
I've got a number of friends out in Sun City Center that don't want to admit that they've got problems with their hearing.
Right. But it's the same concept, right? So if we can get people to understand that this is just as important as this, without this, some of this stuff doesn't matter. We have to be willing, as people, as loved ones, as friends, as community partners, as people that know each other, to be able to reach out and say, "How you doing? You okay?" Ask the question. The Suicide Prevention Month is in September. We have multiple events going on, but the campaign is Be There. Hashtag Be There for those of you on social media. Be There is about literally being there. It's about being in the moment. It's about, if you see somebody that needs assistance, talk to them. Don't wait until you think, oh, maybe I could have. I promise you'll feel much better if you reach out to them and say something, but also know your resources. So the crisis line is an important thing to know, to pass along to other veterans, or to call yourself if you feel like you need it, or if you feel like somebody you know needs it.
It's very, very important to not be afraid to call for help. These guys are going through some pretty rough times over there, and we're asking a lot of them.
Well, and I think that's the biggest part of this, is we're asking more and more, and we have to thank those people we're asking more by being here for them. And that goes across the board. It's not just the VA, it's not just people that know veterans, it's everybody in the community has to understand the importance that a veteran is to our society, to our culture, to where we're at currently in this country. Without veterans, there isn't much else to say, right?
No.
So that conversation needs to include their mental health, and it needs to include, hey, Bill, it's okay that you feel this way. Let's talk about it, and let's make sure that I support you. And as soon as we know that, you're more likely to go in and ask for help or talk to somebody else. You're more likely to call the crisis line because you know that we're here to help you. And ultimately, that's the goal, right? So the goal is community's got to be a part of this, but everybody out there has got to know that the VA, the suicide prevention team, if you need us, call us and we will help.
Dr. Howell, I'm just so pleased you came on the program with me today. I know we didn't cover near the information I would have loved to cover, but I am proud of the VA over there, the Haley VA. They've been great to me. Don't hesitate to go over there and sign up if you haven't signed up. Find out from one of the people over there what you need to do. And if you're not signed up and you still need your help,
please call us.
Please call, because it's important that you do what? Would you
reach out? I mean, that's the Be There is the hashtag. But again, I want to thank you for the time. This is a very important topic that's near and dear to a lot of us, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on here.
Dr. Howell, if we've stopped one vet from hurting themselves today, we've done a job. Thank you for being with us. You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often, because you are, and we'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government.